the rainy crossroads in the heart of Los Angeles. The streets were soaked from an unrelenting downpour. The traffic lights flickered through the haze of the storm, casting red and green glows across the wet pavement. Raindrops danced on rooftops, windows, and the thin plastic umbrella held tightly by a young woman whose eyes flicked left and right, her hand shaking not from cold, but from exhaustion. Her name was Emily Hart, a single mother of two, balancing a part-time cleaning job and night classes, trying to stay afloat after a difficult divorce and a recent eviction. Her car had broken down just 3 days ago, and today was the worst day for it. She had managed to drop her kids at her neighbor's place, promising she'd return before dinner. But the bus she counted on never showed up. Her phone was out of battery. Standing on the edge of a lesser-known street in the Hollywood Hills, soaked shoes and aching legs, she did something she never thought she would. She stuck out her hand to flag down a stranger for a ride. Car after car passed. Some splashed water on her legs. Some didn't even slow. Her shoulders slumped. She whispered a quiet prayer, not expecting much. But then came a black 4x4 SUV, sleek, quiet, steady. It slowed to a halt beside her. The window rolled down and a calm, almost familiar voice said, "Hey, you look like you could use a ride." Emily hesitated. The man wore a beanie and a hoodie. His beard was thick, but there was something kind in his eyes. Soft, warm, not the type you see every day. She couldn't quite place it, but something told her to trust him. I'm trying to get to downtown. "My kids are waiting," she said softly. "Hop in," the man offered, his voice smooth and unrushed. As she got into the passenger seat, dripping water onto the leather seats, she murmured apologies. He waved them off, offered her a towel from the back seat. The interior smelled like sandalwood and something aged, like books or deep wood. They pulled onto the road, and for a moment the silence between them was filled only with the soft hum of the heater and the patter of rain. "Bad day?" he asked, glancing at her with a curious smile. "You could say that," Emily replied. "Life's been testing me. Sometimes life does that right before something changes," the man said, then added, "I'm Keanu, by the way." Emily blinked, then frowned a little. "Like Keanu Reeves?" he chuckled. "Yeah, like that." Her mouth opened, then closed. She stared at him. Now that she looked closer, the voice, the eyes, even his gentle manner, it was him. But why would Keanu Reeves be driving around in a rainstorm, offering rides to strangers? "You're joking, right?" he smiled. "I get that a lot." Emily didn't know what to say. She felt her world shift slightly, like something unbelievable had just entered her very ordinary life. She swallowed hard. "Okay. Let's say you are who you say you are. What are you doing driving around like this?" Keanu looked ahead at the rain-soaked road. "I was just out for a drive. Sometimes I like to wander. Reminds me that we're all still connected. We all need someone sometimes. Even me." Emily didn't expect to cry, but the warmth in his words touched a sore spot. The struggle, the loneliness, the sense of being invisible to the world. It all boiled over. And here a stranger with a name that didn't quite feel real was saying the one thing she needed to hear. "Thank you," she whispered. They drove on. She told him bits about her kids, Maddie and Luke, about her job scrubbing offices and her dream of becoming a nurse. She spoke like someone not used to being listened to, and Keanu listened like someone who didn't need to speak much. When they arrived at the small apartment complex near downtown, Emily started to open the door, but Keanu stopped her. "Hold on," he said, reaching into the glove box. He pulled out a small card and handed it to her. "This is my assistant's number. If you ever need something, seriously, anything, reach out. Just say, 'Emily from the rain.' She'll know." Emily stared at the card. The logo on it was simple but professional. She could barely believe this was happening. "Are you serious?" she asked, breathless. "Very," he replied, and just like that he drove off. She stood outside her door in the rain, holding the card like it was a golden ticket. Inside, her kids laughed as she walked in, unaware that something small but life-changing had just begun. Echoes from the past, whispers of hope the next morning began like every other day for Emily, quiet, hurried, and heavy. Her kids, Maddie and Luke, both under 10, were still asleep in the cramped corner of the one-bedroom apartment they all shared. The peeling paint on the walls, the water stains near the ceiling, and the faint creaks from upstairs were constant, reminders of how far she was from the life she once dreamed of. But something felt different today. As sunlight pierced through the blinds and landed on the coffee-stained carpet, her eyes fell on the small card left on the kitchen counter, the one given to her by Keanu Reeves. She had barely slept the night before, replaying the encounter in her mind over and over. Was it real? Did it actually happen? Part of her feared that maybe she'd dreamed it, but the card was there. Real. Smooth. The ink on the logo hadn't smudged. The name printed neatly at the bottom was simple. Grace, assistant to Mr. Reeves. No phone number, just a private email and a note. Use only if it really matters. And that was the problem. What counted as really mattered when your life was a constant storm of missed rent, unpaid daycare, and skipping meals so your kids could eat? Emily tucked the card into her coat pocket and pushed the thought away. She had no right to hope. Not again. She'd been disappointed too many times, by landlords, by promises from state services, by her ex-husband who hadn't sent child support in 8 months. And yet, hope had a funny way of surviving. A whisper inside her wouldn't die down. By noon, she was back at work cleaning a corporate building downtown. She mopped floors while suited men walked past her like she was invisible. But her thoughts were elsewhere. She remembered how Keanu looked at her, not with pity but with respect. Like she wasn't broken, like she mattered. At the end of her shift, drenched in sweat and with aching feet, she sat on a bench across from a fast food joint holding her phone. The screen was cracked but still worked. She opened the email app and hesitated. What could she even write? After several drafts, she finally typed, "Hello, Grace. I met Mr. Reeves yesterday in the rain. He gave me your contact and said I could write if it ever really mattered. I'm a single mom trying to make things work. I'm not asking for charity. I need a stable job, one that lets me pick up my kids on time, even if it's cleaning. Thank you for reading this. Sincerely, Emily from the rain." She hit send, then she waited. Hours. Nothing. The next morning, nothing. The next 3 days, silence. Each night, she came home more exhausted, her kids growing quieter. Maddie had started to notice. "Mommy, why don't we ever go out like the other kids do?" Or, "Why can't I bring lunch to school like Emily does?" Emily had no answers, just hugs and tears she cried when they were asleep. But on the 4th morning, her phone buzzed at 6:27. A reply. "Hi, Emily. Yes, we remember you. Mr. Reeves asked me to follow up. Please meet me at this address at 10 a.m. today. Bring nothing but yourself." Grace, the address was in Beverly Hills. She stared at it. Her palms sweated. Was this real? What if it was a joke? What if she'd misunderstood? But hope, that stubborn hope, rose again. Emily put on her cleanest outfit, an old navy blue blouse and black jeans that didn't quite fit anymore. She brushed her hair twice, applied a little lip balm, and told her neighbor, Mrs. Landry, that she had a job meeting. Then she borrowed her bus fare and left. The mansion she arrived at was hidden behind tall iron gates and even taller hedges. When the taxi pulled away, she stood outside, unsure of whether to ring the bell. But the gate opened by itself. A voice came from a speaker near the path. "Emily Hart?" "Yes," she said, her voice small. "Please come in. Mr. Reeves is expecting you." Her heart pounded. She stepped through and followed a winding path lined with stones and ivy. The house ahead was modern, all glass and steel, but warm somehow, like the man she met that night in the rain. The door opened before she could knock. A woman in a gray suit greeted her. mid-40s, professional but kind. She extended her hand. "Grace," she said. "Thank you for responding," Emily said, voice cracking. "You met Keanu on a rainy day, gave him a real smile, and didn't ask for anything. That's rare. He wants to help, but not just with money, with opportunity. Please come in." Inside, the house was beautiful. Calm, books everywhere, walls covered in art from different cultures. But more than the beauty, it was peaceful. Like, it was built for quiet minds. Keanu appeared minutes later, dressed simply in a t-shirt and jeans. No spotlight, no drama. Just the same calm aura. "Emily," he said, walking over. "You showed me something that day. I drive a lot when it rains, just thinking, trying to find connection in a world that's so noisy. And there you were, brave, kind, real. What kind of work do you want to do?" Emily was speechless. "Don't worry," he added, chuckling. "I'm not here to give handouts. I want to offer a partnership. Grace runs several small businesses I invest in. Cleaning services, nonprofits, arts programs. I'd like you to join one. Paid training, benefits, child-friendly hours." Emily blinked, tears welling up. "Why? Why me?" "Because you didn't ask," he said. "And sometimes those who don't ask are the ones who need it most." Her legs felt weak. She sat, covering her face with her hands as sobs escaped her chest. Not because she was broken, but because something inside her had finally been seen. The hidden kindness behind fame days passed after Emily's visit to the Reeves residence, but the memory of it didn't fade. It echoed in her mind like a warm note of music that played just when she thought life had gone silent. The offer Keanu made wasn't just about a job. It felt like an unseen door opening after years of walking hallways that always led to dead ends. And though she had hesitated, doubted, and even feared waking up to discover it had all been a fantasy, Grace called her the very next day. "We'd like to invite you to orientation," Grace said over the phone, her tone both businesslike and friendly. "You'll be joining our new community program initiative. It's a pilot project Keanu is funding himself. It helps train and employ single parents, veterans, and people from underprivileged backgrounds." Emily's throat tightened. She had never been chosen for anything before. Not in school, not in life, not even in her own marriage. And now, someone was choosing her because she mattered. Her first day at orientation was filled with nerves. The training center wasn't in some sterile corporate tower, but a cozy, renovated arts building tucked away in Echo Park. Walls painted in warm pastels, fresh coffee brewed in the corner, and the scent of lavender and hope hung in the air. She was greeted by others like her, people with tired eyes but strong hearts, all gathered together by one man's quiet kindness. Emily sat in the front row, notebook on her lap, pen in hand, though she wasn't sure what to expect. Then, without any grand entrance or fanfare, Keanu Reeves himself walked in. He wore a plain black sweater, a baseball cap low over his eyes, and a smile that carried no ego. He stepped to the front of the room and said, "I'm not here as an actor. I'm here as someone who believes in people who've been overlooked." His eyes scanned the room and landed on Emily for a brief moment. She swallowed hard. "Some of you probably think this is a charity gig," he continued. "But it's not. It's a mutual exchange. You give your effort, your honesty, your time, and in return you'll be treated with dignity, respect, and a paycheck that honors that. Too many people think kindness is weakness. I think it's the only real strength we have left in this world." Emily had heard 100 motivational speeches in her life, online, at churches, at community events, but this one wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It pierced something deep inside her, like water slipping through cracks in dry ground. After his short address, the group was led by trainers through practical workshops, job readiness, communication skills, and even child care management. Everything was structured to serve not just survival but self-worth. Emily watched as Grace coordinated everything like an orchestra conductor, while Keanu often helped behind the scenes, stacking chairs, brewing coffee, or listening quietly. To stories from the attendees, one afternoon, as Emily was leaving early to pick up her children, she noticed him at the side entrance alone, tossing breadcrumbs to a pair of birds. Something about the stillness in him reminded her of someone carrying invisible weight. She hesitated, then stepped closer. "Mr. Reeves." He turned, smiled. "Call me Keanu, always Keanu." I wanted to say thank you," she said, softly. "Not just for the job, but for seeing me. Most people just look right past." He nodded as if he understood exactly what she meant. "You know, I grew up watching my mother work 3 jobs just to put food on the table. She never asked anyone for help, but I always wished someone had noticed her. So maybe that's why I notice people now." Emily blinked back tears, surprised by the gentleness in his confession. Fame hadn't erased his roots, it had deepened them, and that made his kindness even more rare. He smiled again, his eyes crinkling. "You're doing amazing, Emily, I hope you know that." "I'm trying," she said. "Trying is everything," he replied. As weeks went by, Emily settled into her new role. She worked part-time managing cleaning crews at community centers and schools, while also assisting with program logistics. For the first time, she came home not dreading tomorrow, but looking forward to it. She could afford to buy real groceries, not just dollar store canned food. She could take her kids to the park and buy ice cream without guilt. But the most profound change wasn't external, it was within her. The hopelessness that had quietly built walls around her spirit began to crack. She started believing again, not just in others, but in herself. Then one Friday, just after her shift ended, Grace pulled her aside. "Keanu wants you to join him tomorrow for something special," she said. "Me?" Emily asked, stunned. "Why?" Grace smiled. "He didn't say. But when Keanu reaches out like that, there's always a reason." The next day, Emily found herself seated inside a modest community hall in South Central Los Angeles. The space had been transformed into a surprise birthday celebration. Not for a celebrity, but for a 94-year-old veteran who'd been forgotten by his family. Keanu had learned about him through a local newspaper story and decided to throw him a party. As the old man arrived, eyes wide with disbelief, the room burst into applause. Keanu wheeled out a cake himself. Emily watched from the sidelines, hand pressed to her chest, overwhelmed by the purity of it all. She turned to Grace. "He does this often?" "All the time," Grace whispered. "But he never posts about it. He doesn't want fame for kindness. He just believes people deserve to be remembered." At that moment, something shifted in Emily. She understood why their paths had crossed that rainy night. Not by chance, not by luck, but because kindness finds those willing to carry it forward. She knew now, this wasn't just a job. It was a calling. And she wasn't just a single mother anymore. She was a light in someone else's storm. A voice for the voiceless, the days that followed the veteran's birthday celebration unfolded like pages in a story Emily never thought she'd be part of. Each day at the center was no longer just about work. It was about meaning, about purpose, about showing up and seeing lives slowly transform, just like hers had. Every morning when she dropped her kids off at school, they didn't ask anymore why they couldn't afford this or that. They saw her smile now. They saw strength return to her tired eyes. And though her circumstances still carried shadows, she walked through them with a quiet fire Keanu had unknowingly helped reignite. Emily had always been soft-spoken. In classrooms, she sat in the back. In meetings, she rarely spoke up. But something had begun to shift. She started noticing the others in the program, especially the young mothers like herself, who arrived wearing second-hand shoes and expressions full of unspoken grief. Women who juggled 3 kids, aging parents, and 2 jobs. Emily saw herself in them. More importantly, she wanted them to see what she had finally seen in herself, that their voices mattered. One day, Grace approached her with an unexpected request. "We're hosting a community event next weekend," she said, tapping her clipboard. "Keanu would like one of the program graduates to speak, someone who can share what the journey has felt, like he asked for you." Emily froze. "Me? Speak in front of people?" Grace nodded. "He believes in you. We all do. And honestly, Emily, I think you're ready." She wasn't ready, at least not by her old standards. Her hands trembled when she thought about standing in front of a crowd, but her heart beat with something deeper. Not fear, not even pride. It was purpose. Over the next few days, Emily wrote and rewrote her speech. At night, after tucking in Maddie and Luke, she sat under the dim glow of the kitchen light, scribbling notes between dinner plates and unfinished homework. She poured everything into it. The sleepless nights, the hospital bills, the eviction, notice still folded in her drawer, the face of her daughter asking why she couldn't bring cupcakes to school like the other kids. She wrote about the rain, the stranger, the ride that changed everything. The day of the event arrived. The center had been transformed again. Banners hung from the rafters, balloons danced in the breeze, and folding chairs filled the open courtyard. Food trucks lined the side streets, local bands played soft acoustic music, and children ran between tables with painted faces and dripping popsicles. It was more than a celebration, it was a rebirth. And in the middle of it, Emily stood, holding her speech with fingers that refused to stop shaking. Keanu approached just before she went up. He wasn't on stage. He wasn't being mobbed by fans. He stood behind the scenes, calm as always. "You nervous?" he asked gently. Emily nodded, laughing awkwardly. "I'm afraid I'll cry, or mess up, or freeze." "Then you'll be human," he said. "And that's all they need you to be." He patted her shoulder and stepped back. She turned toward the stage. Grace introduced her. "This is Emily Hart, one of our first graduates. She's a mother, a fighter, and someone who reminds us why we started this." As she stepped to the microphone, the crowd quieted. "Hi," she began, voice barely above a whisper. "My name is Emily. I used to believe I was invisible." The words landed softly, then gained strength. "For years, I lived in the background of my own life. I worked, I cleaned, I did what I could to keep my kids fed, but inside I felt like no one saw me, not even myself. Then one day, in the middle of a rainstorm, I asked a stranger for a ride. I didn't know who he was. I only knew he looked at me like I mattered." She paused, emotion rising in her throat. In the back, she saw Keanu standing with his arms crossed, his eyes steady and proud. That stranger turned out to be Keanu Reeves. But this story isn't about celebrity. It's about kindness, about how one act, one small moment, can turn a life around. I didn't ask for a handout. I asked for a little light. And that's what I got. Now I stand here not as someone who was saved, but as someone who found her voice again. And I want to use it, not for me, but for the ones still in the shadows, waiting to be seen. As she stepped down, the silence broke into a rising applause, not polite but heartfelt. People stood, clapped, some even wiped tears. Emily walked back, breathless, overwhelmed, not by the noise but by the realization. She was no longer invisible. Keanu hugged her briefly. "That," he whispered, "was stronger than anything I've ever performed on screen." That night, as she tucked in her children, Maddie clutched her tightly. "Mommy, I'm proud of you," she said. Emily's heart swelled. But the story didn't end there. 2 days later, Grace showed up at her work site holding a letter. "This came for you," she said, smiling. Emily opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a formal invitation from a well-known nonprofit organization. They had heard her speech and wanted her to join their advisory board for community outreach. They didn't want a celebrity. They wanted a voice that understood, a voice like Emily's. From borrowed time to timeless impact, when Emily first stepped into the boardroom of the nonprofit, she didn't feel like she belonged. Not at first. It was a sleek downtown building, with glass walls, polished wooden floors, and an air of quiet confidence that felt nothing like the concrete corners of her old life. Everyone in the room seemed so sure of themselves. Well-dressed professionals who spoke in terms like policy structure, funding streams, and donor alignments. But Emily, in her modest thrift shop blazer and second-hand heels, didn't come with degrees or titles. She came with something else, experience. Real, raw, lived experience that statistics could never explain. The nonprofit was launching a new initiative, one meant to bridge the gap between assistance programs and the people they were meant to serve. And they wanted Emily to help shape it. When the director of operations, a silver-haired woman named Melinda, introduced her to the room, she said, "We brought Emily here not because of what she studied, but because of what she survived." At first, Emily only listened, but soon she spoke. And when she spoke, people leaned in. She told them about the night she had to choose between diapers or dinner, about how the bus system fails working mothers, about how a broken washing machine can feel like a personal crisis when you're barely getting by. And most importantly, she told them about dignity, how even well-meaning charity can sometimes feel like pity unless it's offered with respect. "Don't give people scraps," she said. "Give them seats at the table." Her words didn't just move the room, they shifted something deeper. And over the weeks, Emily became more than a guest speaker. She became a voice others started to rely on. Every meeting she attended, she brought stories, not just her own, but from others she now mentored at the center. Stories of resilience, quiet victories, and small moments of grace that programs and spreadsheets often overlook. Keanu watched this evolution from a distance, never seeking credit. Sometimes he'd drop by quietly, offering her a nod, a gentle, "How are the kids?" and then fading into the background. He didn't want to be the center. He wanted her to rise, and rise she did. The nonprofit offered her a paid consulting position, flexible hours, remote options. They even helped sponsor a part-time scholarship for her nursing degree, something she had once given up on completely. But even more surprising was what happened in her own neighborhood. People had started noticing her, not as the struggling single mom who was always rushing from job to job, but as someone different, now, hopeful, strong. Mrs. Landry, her elderly neighbor, asked her to speak at a local church event. Another parent asked if she'd tutor their daughter in reading. Slowly, without any intention of it, Emily became something she never imagined. An example. One rainy afternoon, much like the day she met Keanu, she stood outside the school waiting for her children. A woman with tired eyes and a toddler on her hip approached her. "You're Emily, right?" she asked. "Yes. I heard you talk at the community center last week. You said something about being brave even when your voice shakes. I've been trying to leave a bad situation. I think I'm ready now." Emily reached out, touched the woman's arm gently. "Then let me help you. You don't have to do it alone." And just like that, the cycle of kindness continued. But while Emily's world was blooming, something quieter was unfolding behind the scenes. One evening, after a long day at the center, Grace called her. "Keanu asked if you could visit him. Tonight," she said. "Just you. No big meeting. He's at his place in the hills." Emily, puzzled, agreed. She arrived just after sunset. The house glowed softly in the amber light of dusk. The wind carried the scent of cedar and rain, and birds chirped in the distance as if the world itself was trying to stay calm for what was about to be shared. Keanu greeted her at the door, barefoot, holding 2 mugs of tea. "Thanks for coming," he said, leading her to a quiet patio overlooking the city. "I've been wanting to talk to you, not as a mentor, just as a friend." Emily sat beside him, warmed by the tea and the honesty in his voice. "I've spent years helping people from the shadows," he said. "Writing checks, showing up quietly, doing what I could. But lately I've been thinking, maybe it's time for something bigger, something public." Emily looked at him, confused. "You mean like a foundation?" "Maybe," he said, "but not with my name on it. I don't want this to be about me. I want it to be about people like you. Voices that come from the ground up, the ones that rarely get heard unless someone lifts the mic to their lips." Emily's heart fluttered. "What are you asking?" Keanu turned toward her, his eyes serious, but full of that same gentleness he'd carried since the day they met. "I want you to help me lead it, not behind the scenes, not as an assistant. I want you at the front, shaping it, giving it its heartbeat." Emily was silent. In her mind, she saw her journey, scrubbing offices in silence, crying behind locked bathroom doors, reading bedtime stories while hungry, standing in the rain with nothing but hope in her pocket. And now, this. Why me? She finally whispered, voice trembling. Because, Keanu said softly, you don't just survive, you illuminate. And the world needs that. A tear rolled down Emily's cheek, but she didn't wipe it away. It felt holy, real, a piece of her story that deserved to be felt. Then let's do it, she said. And as the city lights began to shimmer below them, two very different souls, one known around the world, one only just beginning to be known, sat, side by side, planning something greater than either of them could build alone. Not a charity, a movement. The ripple no one saw coming. Months passed like seasons changing quietly in the background of a world that never stopped moving. And somewhere in between the ticking of time and the hush of unseen transformation, Emily Hart became more than a name. She became a force. The initiative Keanu and Emily had envisioned that night on the hill had taken form. The second light, foundation, named after the belief that everyone deserves not just a second chance but a second light. Hope after darkness was no longer an idea on paper. It was a living, breathing, expanding reality. It wasn't flashy. There were no Hollywood ads or red carpet events, no celebrity endorsements, just real people doing real things, building daycares in forgotten neighborhoods, creating scholarship funds for parents returning to school, setting up small grant programs for women escaping abusive homes. And at the center of it all was Emily. She stood on stages now, without shaking. She was interviewed by local TV stations and featured in online documentaries. She was invited to speak at city council meetings and panel discussions. But no matter how bright the light got, she always returned to the same community center every week, the same peeling paint classroom where she once sat as a nervous trainee. She returned because that place reminded her of who she was and who she never wanted to forget. But then came a moment she hadn't expected. Keanu had been distant for a few weeks, not absent, just quieter. She noticed it in their emails, in the pauses between meetings. And though he never missed a deadline or forgot a commitment, his energy had changed. She didn't ask at first, out of respect, out of fear. Until one afternoon he asked to meet at a quiet diner tucked into a canyon road. He arrived first, sitting in a booth near the window, wearing his usual hoodie and calm smile. "You've been doing amazing work," he said when she sat down. She smiled, trying to read his face. "Thank you. But you didn't call me here just to flatter me, did you?" His smile faded slightly, but his eyes stayed steady. "No, I didn't." He leaned back, fingers tapping the side of his mug. "I got some news. About my health." Her breath caught. "It's not terminal," he added quickly as if to reassure her. "But it's serious enough. Something I need to focus on. Something that's going to take me away for a while." Emily blinked. Suddenly, the hum of the diner around them became too loud. The clinking of cutlery, the chatter of strangers. It all blurred. "Are you okay?" she asked quietly. "I will," he said, "but this means I'll need to step back from everything, including the foundation." She nodded slowly, trying to process what that meant. Not just for the work, for her, for him, for the thousands who had felt the ripple of his quiet kindness. "I want you to take full leadership," he continued. "Not temporary, not acting, full. You're already doing most of it anyway. People believe in you. More importantly, you believe in the mission." Emily stared at him. "I don't know if I'm ready." "You weren't ready to give that speech," he said, smiling gently. "You weren't ready to email Grace. You weren't ready to raise 2 kids alone. But you did all of it." Tears pooled in her eyes, but she nodded. "Then I'll try," she whispered. "Trying is everything," he echoed with a grin. And then he reached into his coat pocket and slid a folded piece of paper across the table. "Open it later," he said. "Not now." They hugged as they parted. A long, quiet embrace without fanfare. Two people who had walked into each other's storms and built a shelter no one else could see. That night, Emily opened the letter. Dear Emily, I never believed in fate, but then it rained and I took a wrong turn. Or maybe it was the right one. Because that's how I met you. I've spent my life pretending to be people stronger than me. But you never had to pretend. Your courage is real. Your story is real. And it's one the world needs. If I don't come back soon, don't pause the work. Grow it. Break the mold. Fail with fire if you must, but never go quiet again. Thank you for giving me back something I didn't know I'd lost. A reason to believe in ordinary miracles. Keep lighting the second lights. With quiet pride, that letter became her fire. Years passed. The Second Light Foundation expanded to cities across the country, then beyond. And with every person it touched, people heard not just about programs or resources, but about a woman named Emily Hart, who once stood in the rain and changed everything by asking for help from a stranger. Keanu Reeves eventually returned, thinner but healthy, standing once again beside Emily, not as her savior, but as her friend, her equal, her believer. At a gala event held in a city once broken by poverty, Emily gave one final speech that went viral around the world. We live in a world that tells us kindness is weakness, she said, her voice strong and clear. But I am standing here today because one man believed otherwise. He saw me, not for who I was, but for who I could become. And that belief, that choice, set fire to 1,000 lives. This isn't his story, and it's not mine anymore. It's yours now. Take the light, and pass it on. And somewhere in the back, in a quiet corner as always, Keanu Reeves smiled, because he had always known this was how it was meant to be. Not a legacy of fame, but a legacy of love.